Welcome to Your Health Matters here on News Radio 570 WSYR. My name is Carl Sterling, and as always, it's really good to be here in an effort to bring you the best education possible to help you with your health span within your lifespan, help you to live that longer life that most of us are desiring to do, and healthier life. I have a very special guest with me today. His name is Dr. Michael Okun. He's a renowned neurologist. He is the co-founder and director of the Norman Fixel Institute for Neurological Disease at University of Florida Health. He is also a distinguished professor of neurology with over 600 peer-reviewed articles and 14 books to his name, but we're going to talk about book number 15 today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Michael Okun. Thanks for joining me. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's just a pleasure to be with you, and looking forward to chatting.
Oh, me too. So you and a gentleman named Dr. Ray Dorsey, who we just had on last week. And he was on my show last year, and a lot of people were requesting, let's learn more about Parkinson's. Well, what beautiful timing, because you have a book that just came out this past week called The Parkinson's Plan. I'm excited about it. In fact, I have it on the audio version because I seem to learn better if I listen. But tell us, building upon the previous book that you wrote with Dr. Dorsey called Ending Parkinson's Disease, how does this book build upon that one?
Yeah. So, in our last book was called "Ending Parkinson Disease: A Prescription for Action." We did a lot of research where we really dug deep, leaned in, talked about what it takes to end a disease, to move that needle, to really change trajectories. And we came up with an idea, a thesis, where it's prevent, advocate, care, and treat, or the Parkinson Pact. And the Parkinson Pact, idea came from looking at diseases like HIV, cancer, polio, and what it took to really get ahead in those disease states. And so we moved that forward. The book, interestingly enough, has a very similar title to the bill that was passed in Congress, the Ending Parkinson Disease Act. We were one of many groups that advocated there. And one of the best parts about that book was that a grassroots organization called the PD Avengers, were born from that. And now there's almost 10,000. And hopefully people will go to www.pdavengers.com and sign up, because it's so important to get our voices heard. That's one of the most important things that has to happen for a disease to move the needle. And on this next book, it's all about the plan. And I often talk about, when my son was playing chess, competitively, when he was in the first or second grade, he had beaten me 2 times and went on his way to beating me a 3rd time before bedtime. And he stopped and he looked at me and he said, "Dad, do you know what your problem is?" And I said, "No, Jack, what is my problem?" And he said, "Your problem is you don't have a plan. And every time I sit down and play you, you have a plan." And so it occurred to us after, moving the pact and thinking about prevention, advocacy, care, and treatment, that we actually really need a plan. And so we interviewed dozens of people from all over the world, from experts, not just in Parkinson, but in other areas, to come up with that comprehensive plan, which is prevent, learn why, where does Parkinson start? Why does it start? How does it progress is the L. P is prevent. The A is amplifying our voices and expanding those care plans to care for the 12 million people that have Parkinson now, which is an explosive amount of growth. And the N is navigation and short, medium, and long-term goals for navigation in this disease.
Yeah, it's interesting. So just the listeners know this about me. You may not know. The work I've done in the past 12, 13 years is highly concentrated on helping people living with Parkinson's to manage disease symptoms. And I'm not a doctor. So in my research, and PD Avengers actually being helpful because I've met many of them along the way at different conferences and this and that. By the way, they're really people with Parkinson's are one of the most educated groups about their own diagnosis, if you will. They dig in and do the research. So bravo, because they're taking action. And one of the things we're looking at is that movement, exercise, can actually help us to, let's say, delay. I should say, perhaps um, delay disease progression, manage symptoms. And it seems like when we get people maybe even walking briskly for a few minutes or half an hour or an hour on a bicycle, doing some kind of maybe zone 2 elevated heart rate cardio, a lot of their symptoms diminish. And that seems to be fairly common. Are you finding this as well?
Yeah, so this is a known, entity in Parkinson, and one of the things that is really super important for people to remember is that the potential for treatment, symptomatic treatment, and the potential for slowing diseases down is not limited to drugs. You have to think about the context, of these types of therapies. And the context is that what happens is that when you take a drug, something changes in your brain. When you put a device in the brain, and you pump either a gene therapy in or electrical stimulation, something changes in how the brain is talking to the different islands. Same thing happens with exercise and behavioral therapies. In fact, there's another great example out in the literature here just this month in JAMA Neurology showing that the behavioral therapies are as good for urinary dysfunction and Parkinson's disease than the drug-based therapies. And it reminds us how powerful and how important it is to pay attention to things. So exercise is like a drug, and it changes, things in the brain, and different chemicals. And we often say it's like miracle grow in the brain, and it's really important for people to understand it from that context.
I'm so glad you said that because it seems, in the people I've interviewed, talked with, learned from over the past decade or so, that the brain is almost like our own pharmacy of sorts. For example, we exercise, we have Miracle Grow, maybe brain-derived neurotrophic factor, other neurochemicals produced as a result of exercising, putting forth the effort. And I find it amazing that we can preserve, let's say, cellular structure, integrity, longevity, functionality by just moving. But we preach it all the time, and I just love to hear this from an expert such as yourself. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's totally something that I think is underappreciated and important for just folks to know.
Oh, last year when we were talking with Dr. Dorsey, he said, I exercise an hour a day, but if I had Parkinson's, I'd exercise 2 hours a day. I thought that was a pretty cool, interesting statement to say, just because of the power that exercise can have. So, with that said, we need to go to break in about 90 seconds. I'm curious to know, can we start off with, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to go to break in a minute. We're with Dr. Michael Okun, a neurologist who is co-author of a new book called The Parkinson's Plan. And I love how it's digging into things, the PACT, the PACT, we can talk about more when we come back from break, is a great way to look at things. I'd love to, before we go to break, maybe just put this in your mind. And we could talk about it when we come back. The question I get often is, are there pockets here in this country, in the United States, or pockets of the world of populations that tend to have higher percentage of Parkinson's and other issues, let's say movement disorders, than not? For example, if we're near a dry cleaning facility, we live above one or near one. If we're near a golf course, things like that. With that said, folks, it's time to go to break. This is News Radio 570 WSYR. Your Health Matters. We're with Dr. Michael Okun. My name's Carl Sterling. Be right back. Okay, we're back with Dr. Michael Okun. So, when we went out to break, I'm curious to know in your research, we did talk with Dr. Dorsey about some of the chemicals in crops, crop dusting, farming, the agricultural stuff, the dry cleaning, golf courses. Maybe we could start there, but segue into, are there populations that do have let's say, a higher percentage or risk of Parkinson's than other populations?
Yeah, and so it's a really great and insightful question, and the answer is yes. And the thing that is really important for folks to take home is that when we do research about how the environment and other factors impact diseases, we can't just average everybody from the entire planet together. And the reason for that is that guess what? In Seoul, South Korea, there's differences in how much smog there is, how much pollution there is in the air. People actually don't tend to move from residence to residence, so they stay in their same homes. And when we compare that to America, it's very different. People tend to move. The different regions have farming, right? And we think about the Mississippi Valley, right? And so there are different levels of air quality in all of the cities. And so what we have learned is that it is absolutely essential that we drill down on those issues and that we not ignore clusters. And what I mean by clusters is groups of folks in specific areas, like in the Mississippi Valley, for example, in the United States, that come down with diseases like Parkinson. And we begin to drill down and say, what's different about those areas? And now we have access to a lot of data sets and a lot of data that can really help us to understand, what might be going on within these areas. And it turns out that if you look at the PD generation study by the Parkinson's Foundation, and I worked as their medical advisor and director for about almost 20 years, and they have this great study called PD generation where they've been getting genetics on folks with Parkinson. It's a very important study. And one of the things it has told us is that only 13 out of every 100 people with Parkinson have one of the 7 most common Parkinson genes. So that means 87 people out of every 100 do not have one of those 7 common genes. And so we have to lean in, and we're going to have to look at the environment, and we're going to have to stop averaging data from across countries and across regions and really drill down and look at regions much more specifically.
Glad you said that because, folks, if you remember last week with Dr. Dorsey, he gave us the exact same set of numbers. 13 out of every 100 may have or have one of the 7 markers, Larky 2 or whatever it is. 87 out of 100, we're looking at something else. So we can probably look to our environment, our surroundings. With that said, and I don't mind if anything gets repeated from last week because it's all worth hearing again. And your take on it too is there's certain things we can control in our life, certain things we can't. For example, and that we keep this a political free zone on this show, but for example, we can't control what passes in Congress. We can't control what other people do. We can't control this and that, but we can control our actions, behaviors. And with that said, what do you advocate, Dr. Okun, for, let's say, lifestyle interventions? The whole gamut from exercise to sleep hygiene, sleep habits, diet, everything like that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for that question. And I would just say one of the things that I've always said to folks, I'm also a practicing doc as well as a teacher and a researcher. And one of the things I always say to folks in the clinic is if you have Parkinson, live a life of Zen. And decreasing stress, anxiety, and sleep deprivation all improve the symptoms and may at some point be demonstrated to have even, more important benefits beyond that and in the actual disease. Now, when we think about the cells in our brain, we have to think about, okay, the cells are trying to live at in a Zen state, right? So that they're functioning well, they're communicating with each other, everything is going well. It's kind of like the thermostat in your house. And you know what happens when the thermostat in your house goes off, particularly during summer. You're not too happy. Same thing during winter, right? So you got to keep everything, together. And anything that throws off that thermostat, throws off those cells, is going to make the Parkinson disease worse and make the symptoms worse. And in some cases, there's research where folks are starting to look at will it impact disease progression? We don't know as much about that last point. So we focus on making sure people sleep. We need to have really good sleep. I always say, how do you know you're sleeping well? And they say, oh, I sleep really well. I sleep this number of hours. And I say, how do you know that? And now we're putting sensors on people. I have a whole bunch of them. I have watches, bands, I have rings. I'm going to try them myself. And we try to set sleep, to 6 to 8 hours. Preferably 7 is a pretty good number to shoot for. If you sleep well, you're going to have a better next day. Super important for this particular disease. Sleep is very, very important. Exercise, of course, we know from Google data. There's Google data, and then there's, scientific data that we use statisticians and really smart people to analyze. Google data is when you have so much information on a topic that it becomes incontrovertible what the answer is, even without running a statistic. And so Google data tells us from all the people walking the earth with these devices that about 7,000, 7,500 steps a day is really good. So I say about, 4 20-minute walks is really good. Getting some stretching bands, learning how to stretch, super important. And so being very consistent with those things. Washing your fruit is really important. There's only a 15-second rule with the USDA. So when it hits it hits your shelf, just know there might be pesticides on it. If you keep that in mind, it'll give you a little extra, umph for thinking about, hey, should I go ahead and wash my fruit before I eat it, right? And then thinking about water filters and where you live, and you talked a little bit about golf courses and things. The issue is when you spray pesticides, they get into the aquifers, they get into our water supplies, and so making sure that you have, particularly if you're on well water, but any water source potentially could be contaminated, and so making sure that that you've got a good water filter that you're running things through, and also knowing that you can get your water tested as well. And so those are some of the things that we think about. There's also twice the risk of skin cancer and Parkinson. We sweat differently in Parkinson. I don't completely understand that, but we should be seeing a dermatologist every year, and you should be on a multivitamin if you're on dopamine. And that's also important because dopamine can deplete cofactors. So those are some of the, just some of the many things. And we have a Parkinson 25 in the book that we talk about, but the many things that we try to emphasize.
Yeah, the Parkinson 25 checklist is great. We talked a little bit about that with Dr. Dorsey last week. Before we go to break, just a quick question. Years ago, the stats showed, I believe, that the number one non-motor symptom of Parkinson's was depression, followed by a close second by anxiety. Are those still near the top of the non-motor?
Yeah, we used to say depression is one of the, the greatest, if not the greatest, unmet hurdle in Parkinson. I remember giving an interview to the USA Today many years ago after there was a Parkinson outcome project that we ran for many years at the Parkinson Foundation. We now have also added apathy to that list. Apathy, man, more common than depression and anxiety.
Really?
But we worry about middle-aged men who get anxious. The data tells us that anxiety can be the first symptom of Parkinson, particularly in men in their 50s. So we think about that. And then about 1 in 5 to 1 in 6 people can get difficulties with demoralization, and you don't have to be depressed or anxious. And so we definitely ask about those things.
Man, yeah, that's really interesting. I'm glad I asked because the year, let's see, WPC or Parkinson Congress, 2016, Portland, Oregon. My friend, I don't know if you know, Dr. Alfonso Fasano out of Toronto Western, he was saying at that presentation, one of those things that apathy was now recognized. That was 9 years ago. And I didn't realize it rose so high on the list. But with that said, folks, we need to go to break. We're with Dr. Michael Okun talking about his brand new book called The Parkinson's Plan. My name is Carl Sterling. You're listening to News Radio 570 WSYR. We'll be right back after the bottom of the hour news break. There we go. Welcome back to Your Health Matters. We're with Dr. Michael Okun talking about his brand new book called The Parkinson's Plan. Co-author is Dr. Ray Dorsey, who we had on last week. It's an amazing book full of all kinds of information to help to educate us about Parkinson's, how to prevent it, maybe how to manage it, you might want to get some things off the Parkinson's 25 checklist. Take a look. It might change some of your behaviors throughout the day and things you are mindful of to think about and do or not do, just so we can live a better quality of life. Dr. Okun, I'm curious to know, without politicizing anything, if certain things, like we said last segment, we can control, certain things we can't. There are concerns and worries about some things that are going on as a result of maybe the current administration or the big, beautiful bill. Is there anything in there that you're thinking about for population in general that is concerning?
Yeah. So, as you probably imagine, Carl, we worry all the time about everything. We worry about our experiments, we worry about our research, worry about, the impact. And of course, we worry about the tremendous rise in Parkinson's disease. We back in 2013, I had written this book called Parkinson Treatment 10 Secrets to a Happier Life. And it took this really unexpected path to becoming a bestseller. And it had really simple things, 10 simple things people could do. And it just turned out people weren't doing them. And in the prologue, I referred to Parkinson becoming a pandemic, and people took exception to that word and to the alarmist nature of that. And I took some criticism and some heat, for that, which is fine. I have no problems taking heat. And pan is a Greek word that means all, and demos means people. And in fact, the word pandemic wasn't invented as a word, didn't come around as a word. It was there before we understood bacteria and viruses and causes. And of course, it's been linked and used, and I think used appropriately by public health authorities for us to help the society identify, infectious disease and outbreaks and things like that. But it turns out the main principles, no matter where you stand on the debate of the use of the word, the main principles are the same. People are getting Parkinson's disease all over the planet, in every geography, all people, all places. And we said it was going to explode. Then in the Ending Parkinson's Disease book, those numbers we predicted by 2035 would be 12 million people with Parkinson based on the Global Burden of Disease study. And people said, again, you're an alarmist. You're alarming everybody. This is crazy. And now in our latest book, The Parkinson Plan, we have a new cut of data. And guess what, Carl? The news is really bad. 11.8 million people by 2025. That means that we've hit our 12 million mark 10 years before even our explosive predictions.
Yep. Right now,
Today, we need to take care of those people.
Yes.
So when we think about what's going on, a couple of points resonate for me. One, this shouldn't be political. It's bipartisan. We passed the Ending Parkinson's Disease Act with the PD Avengers and the Ending Parkinson book and all the different foundations, Michael J. Fox, Parkinson Foundation, everybody worked together. Really shouldn't be bipartisan. The House passed it for 407 and 9, the Senate unanimously. And so that shows that there is real support. And I'm very grateful for that.
That is good.
And when we look at the Making America Healthy Again Act, things that are in that, particularly in the pediatric populations and the first statements coming out, really apply well to Parkinson about, keeping our food supply, our air, and improving chronic diseases from prevention and moving to primary prevention. So I think that's a great thing. Where we're worried with legislation now is that we really need to lean in, and we're putting in about 1/10 to 1/15 of the amount of money we need to into Parkinson's disease in order to move the needle. We showed that in the Ending Parkinson's Disease book. Now we have specific projections where we've studied HIV, cancer, and other diseases to look at what is it going to take to move that needle, and we're going to need $2 to $3 billion with a B. We're only putting 250 million in now. And so we are really concerned about legislation and concerned, that folks will understand that if we really want to make a dent, move the needle, help the 12 million people that have Parkinson, and then move toward primary prevention, we're going to need to invest more. At the end of the, after we put in the ending Parkinson disease book, we did a red card campaign to the White House, to Joe Biden, and we one of the things we asked for was banning the pesticides like paraquat that are causing Parkinson. We have moved backwards on that issue. We're hoping we can move forward again. Same on the TCE, issue with chemicals. We asked that telemedicine be made permanent to bring care into the home, and that's
TCE. I'm sorry to interrupt. TCE is the dry cleaning.
right. It's trichloroethylate and
Thank you.
three
Thank you.
chlorines, and then there's also one called perchloroethylate or per.
Okay.
It says 4 chlorines. Those are the dry cleaning chemicals or degreasers that are used on aircraft and other things in engine shops, and people dip the things in. It really degreases things, quite well. So we
Degrease your brain too, right?
well, you wish. It's the actual it'll grease your brain.
It'll grease your brain. Yeah.
Yeah. So we called for telemedicine to become permanent. We told people that wasn't going to be permanent after COVID, and that has unfortunately come true, that, it's being rolled back, and we don't see as much coverage for telemedicine, and we need 10 times more funding to get the needle to move in Parkinson like it's moved in HIV and other diseases.
Okay. So with that said, then it would sound like some of that is for research. Is a lot of that for research? And
Yeah, so the way that we have taken this apart in the Parkinson plan is we need to make a proportional investment across the disease into each of the 4 letters, and so the prevent needs to be proportional. We're only spending 2 to 3 cents on every dollar for prevention. That's ridiculous. Okay, so we need to be having a proportional amount there. We need to be putting a proportional amount of our investment into learning where it starts, where it comes from, instead of looking downstream after all the proteins have already deposited in the brain. We need to change our care systems to align better to successes we've had in cancer and HIV. And we then need to navigate the new treatments. And so we're calling for a $750 million investment in each of those 4 areas.
well, it's sad that the funding isn't there when it clearly seems it could be, it should be. I did do my co-host, who's not here today with me doing this, but she and I did a show last month of just hard factual data about Big Beautiful Bill, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Got a lot of flack for it because, of course, it goes right into, oh, you're being a politicizing. No, we're just talking from factual information that now is the time. If there was ever a time to take the reins and take the reins to take control over your health, it would be right now. We absolutely need to be in charge of what we do. Education is paramount. That's why we do the show and bring people like Dr. Okun to the show, people, and Dr. Dorsey and many others, so we can get the legit experts of all experts out there who are in the trenches doing the research, grinding every day, countless hours to help everyone, really just help everyone to prevent and treat. So there's no politicization at all about this. It's just the fact that while there are probably a few things going on, like, dies out of ice cream soon and dies out of some other things soon, that's great. I'm glad. So good. Bravo. But at the same time, folks, like we have said countless times and every week for the past 80 weeks I've been doing this or whatever, if there was ever a time to take control over your health because your health matters, hence the name of the show, that would be right now. And it's not to scare you, but to say no one's coming to save you. Dr. Okun can't save you. Dr. Lustig talked very much with us about he can't save you. Your doctor can't necessarily save you. Donald Trump and RFK, they're not going to save you. However, the one who can really do the most to save your health is you. Now, all these amazing people can have a part in educating you to save you and helping you, but it's up to you. With that said, we're going to break. We're coming back for one more segment with Dr. Michael Okun. Be right back. Okay, we're back with Dr. Michael Okun, author of a brand new book called The Parkinson's Plan. Doctor, to take things out, let's say on a note, a call to action, if you will. Let's talk about what can we do? What would be a great call to action? Something, where can people start right now, today, to help themselves live a better life?
Yeah. So I mean, I think that I like to think of it in two ways. I like to think of it as, ask yourself about Parkinson's disease, and we talked about this explosive growth. Ask yourself, what can you do for yourself? Okay, and what can we do as a society? And I think that's all about what the new book, The Parkinson Plan, is really about, that path. What can you do and what can we do as a society? And so when I think about what you can do, I think about, things like the Parkinson 25, so making sure that you're washing your fruit, getting your, living clean, being zen, getting your sleep, getting your exercise, thinking about pesticides and thinking about your generation, your kids' generation, and your kids' generations, about how maybe it's the industrialization of the society that has brought us all of these extra unintended gifts and consequences like degenerative diseases, and what can we do about them. So I think about, like, what can we do? That's the Parkinson 25, each individually. What can we do as a society? Well, that's where the Parkinson Plan comes in. We've really taken a deep dive on this and looked at what it took in the last book, Ending Parkinson's Disease, to move the needle toward cures and toward, treatments that really make a difference for folks. I think we're all interested in that. I think it's a bipartisan, issue. I don't think anybody needs to get political. I think we all agree that this is a great goal, and one that we should all aspire toward. With that, we do need to make our voices heard. I think the HIV community, the cancer communities, the polio communities did a much better job. And so if I had to grade us, I would give us a low mark for how well we've done in advocacy. I think everybody should be joining groups like the pdavengers.com. They should buy the book, Parkinson Plan, Ending Parkinson's Disease. All of the proceeds go to charity, to those books. We should be spreading the word, and we need many more people involved in this process and talking about it in dialogue. And even if we disagree on different issues, different challenges, the dialogue is really important. And when we think about the plan, I'll just remind people that the plan should be P is prevent. There's no reason why we shouldn't have a world where we're thinking about primary prevention. And people say it's crazy to think about preventing Parkinson. No, it's not. It's exactly what we should be thinking about. We do it in cardiology, we do it in heart disease, we do it in many other diseases. We need to be shifting our thinking toward the P, prevent. And prevention is not a pill. It's going to be policy, and it's going to be how we take apart the science and the data and decide to make changes together to see if we can affect the world in a positive light. We then need to, the L for the plan is we need to learn why. We need to stop focusing on these plaques that deposit on the brain that are way late in the process of Parkinson, and figure out, it's not one disease. When it does come, where does it start? Why does it start? Why does it progress? We need to and make a proportional investment, into the why and learning why. And that's what the L is. The A, the amplification of voices. Well, we have now 11.8 million people already with Parkinson. We're supposed to have 12 million in 2035. So we have got to take care of the folks that we have that have Parkinson now. We've expanded in the book the thoughts about how this is done. People that know me know that I am a broken record of saying the person with the disease is the sun, and we should always revolve around the person or the patient. And we've expanded that now to be the entire universe. And so if you think about all the planets, so you still have the person as the sun, everybody orbiting around, right? The closest planet is Mercury. Mercury is the caregiver. The caregiver care partner gets hot. It takes all the heat on the person, but also has the connectivity to all the other planets, which are all the other many specialties you need to be successful in Parkinson, from rehab to mental health to all sorts of folks that are going to have to be there at the right time in the right places to make sure that you're successful. Pluto is the almost planet. That's stigma, and that's always kind of rotating out there. We need to get rid of stigma. There should be no stigma in this disease. The satellites that are up there are things like those wearable sensors we talked about with on your sleep, being able to give automated reports, your steps, all those things. Those are things that can be helpful. The stars are, of course, all the organizations like PD Avengers and all the great organizations like Parkinson's Foundation, like the Fox Foundation, Parkinson's UK, and others. And then, of course, the asteroid field is what it's like to navigate with a chronic disease. And we have a quote in the book about a little movie called Star Wars, where Chewbacca and Han Solo are flying through on the Millennium Falcon, trying to make it through that asteroid field, and talking about what are the odds of them making it through without crashing. And it's astronomically one, and you can imagine how big. It's the same odds for a person right now anywhere in the world making it with Parkinson's disease. And so we certainly need to change that. So the PLAN of the clan is really important. What can you do, and what can we do as a society?
Oh, that's great, man. I like that a lot. So the name of the book, folks, is called the Parkinson's Plan, and it's available at all major booksellers, and it's in audio format too. And I believe that comes with a PDF file that I didn't download yet. Most of the audiobooks do. So we've gone over a lot of things here today with Dr. Okun. We have about a little over 3 minutes left. I'll just say real quick, I was in 3 Parkinson studies at Hershey Penn State when my son was doing his PhD there. Dr. Shumei Wong was his mentor, neurologist. Amazing lady. She moved south and went to a different place. But what I found interesting is through these 3 studies, first of all, the testing was really interesting. I enjoy that. So now we do a bunch of that here, what's within my scope anyways. But the fact that paraquat was one of the studies, because in Pennsylvania, a lot of paraquat is used. So the agricultural, let's say the people who spread that for a living have a higher incidence of Parkinson's than the general population. The other 2 studies I was in both had to do with welding, because I was a control subject. I've never been any of this stuff. I don't have Parkinson's. So manganese sulfate from welding, that's a problem. So there are all kinds of things all over the place that can seemingly enter our body one way or another. Breathing, topical, ingestion, eating, drinking, can cause problems in us. And but why, with 2 minutes left, why do you think they haven't banned paraquat here when it's almost everywhere else banned? That's an odd one.
So it's a great question.
Is it greed?
Over 30 countries have banned paraquat, including China. Countries like the UK have banned paraquat, but are more than happy to manufacture it and send it to the United States,
Of course.
and it's getting things done is hard. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that folks say hey, like why haven't we done these things? Yeah, sure. There's a whole bunch of these, like, duh, of course we should do these things, but getting things done is hard. And honestly, to get it done, we're going to need more voices. We have about 1,000 people in the PD Avengers. We really need like hundreds of thousands of people. And so sign up, get involved, put voice to work. That's what's done it in other diseases, and we need to follow.
I appreciate that. I'm going to put, because I'm familiar with PD Avengers very well, I'm going to put a link to them and where people can buy your books and things, and a few links to what you do in the description of all platforms where you can listen to this or watch it. So, Dr. Okun, it's really great to meet you, and I want to just say thank you so much for making this time, and thanks for the great work you do and for everything. Thank you.
Listen, it's an honor to be with you. what you're doing is so important, and just to be a small part of it, today with you chatting about Parkinson and what we can do, let's make a difference together. So thank you for having me.
My pleasure. This is Your Health Matters. My name is Carl Sterling. We've been with Dr. Michael Okun. See you next week for another episode.